In the criminal trial of Derek Chauvin, the officer involved in the George Floyd incident, the jury deliberated very quickly and came back and found him guilty, which was a little surprising, but not too surprising. It was surprising because many of us thought the case had gone well for Chauvin. In fact, the state's own use of force expert testified that Chauvin was entitled to use more force than he had actually used against George Floyd. But I think for obvious reasons, the jury came back and said, nah, he's guilty. Well, we know after the trial, these jurors stated they feared for their safety because of the extremists. Today, the jury will begin deliberations in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I think we're all biased. We have approached this from the beginning, having heard from witnesses, having watched the video, having seen everything about this case, and not to mention that many of us are biased in terms of the Second Amendment and self-defense. And so we viewed this whole case from that perspective. And I've stated as much. You know, look, I'm a big fan of Andrew Branca's legal analysis over at Legal Insurrection, but let's be real. I mean, he's a use of force expert. He's a self-defense expert, but he's been very favorable to Chauvin and Kyle Rittenhouse. And, you know, I think it's important to point out he's been fair as well. He's called out when the defense has done bad, when the state has done well. But we heard a lot in Chauvin's trial, how bad the prosecution was going and how many mistakes they made, and Chauvin was still convicted. Now the feds are coming after him. Let's just start with this. Even if Kyle Rittenhouse does get acquitted on all charges, which I got to be honest, I'm not too convinced of. Well, then the feds might still come after him. I think we're biased, and I think we must approach this from the view and set expectations. Kyle Rittenhouse may absolutely get convicted on some very serious charges. As much as a lot of people don't want to hear it, ADA Krause passionately said, just because someone is threatening you, you don't get to just go and shoot a bunch of people. It's an interesting and impassioned argument that is technically incorrect. If people are threatening you and they're putting you at risk of great bodily harm or fear, you do get to defend yourself. We just would prefer it if it didn't happen. But you know, I was watching the closing arguments from the defense yesterday, and some things put me off. I was confused by some things, and I've got some criticisms. I was reading some posts from leftists. A friend of mine who is a particularly lefty, and it's just shocking. I mean, it's cool. I'm glad that we're friends. You know, this person clearly disagrees with me on everything, but we get along, and it's fantastic. I would say friends. And this person said the defense did a miserable job, and after watching the prosecution, they didn't realize how strong of a case they actually had against Kyle Rittenhouse. I think that's bias in the other direction. I think the left is looking at the Kyle Rittenhouse case saying, wow, he pointed his rifle at them, therefore it's provocation, not self-defense. You're going to convince the jury of that? I'm not entirely convinced. I think the jury will see that this kid was an EMT. He wanted to help. He was helping the rioters. He was trying to de-escalate, but things got out of hand and he defended himself. However, that's a bias that we have because, well, we've had the benefit of a year of talking with people like Richie McGinnis, Drew Hernandez, Julio Rosas, Jorge Ventura, etc., Shelby Talcott, all of these people, Elijah Schaefer, witnesses on the ground to the night in question, not necessarily to the specific moments with Rittenhouse, but you know, all these people are down there witnessing this stuff happen. And to us, it's clear. We've seen the riots in the greater context. We've seen the riots in Milwaukee, in Seattle. We've seen all of this. We've seen the Chaz. We know who Rosenbaum is. And so, of course, when we watch this, we view it very much so from the, well, we know that Kyle Rittenhouse was not a rioter. We know he's not part of a greater movement. We know he's not some wingnut militia guy. He was a kid who wanted to be a local cop. No delusions of grandeur there. But let me tell you a few things. We have this from the New York Post. They go through the counts, the deliberations on potential prison times. They're going to be deliberating. And when I was watching the closing arguments from the defense, I was disappointed. I mean it. You know, they basically do a PowerPoint presentation. That's how it works. And I felt like ADA Binger was frustrating. He was annoying. He was insulting and condescending, manipulative, deceptive. But as much as I think people who support Kyle Rittenhouse don't want to accept it, he had a through line with his presentation in his closing argument. And his lies will greatly help him in getting Kyle Rittenhouse convicted should they come back and convict. 88 Krause. So there's Binger and Krause. Krause was the heavier set gentleman, and I think he did a way better job than Binger. Now, people were, I tweeted this. I said Binger's way better at this than, Krause is way better at this than Binger. And I had people saying to me, what trial are you watching? Are you crazy? He's flubbing it. That's arrogance. I saw Krause. I've seen his screw-ups. I've seen Binger's screw-ups. But don't forget when the defense failed to object on a bunch of things. And maybe that was the goal of the defense. Let the prosecution come off as abrasive and aggressive and annoying. Okay. Maybe. But during the closing arguments, before I get to that, in Krause's testimony, he was impassioned and believable. Doesn't mean he's right. It just means that when Binger is presenting his argument, it's annoying and it grates on me. And I think the defense realized that when he does things like, Kyle Rittenhouse came with a gun to kill people. I'm like, just shut. Oh, jeez, man. Calm down. But Krause, that was interesting. Because Krause was like, you don't get to just shoot people. Okay? There's other means. There's non-lethal means. There's things you can do if you fear for your safety. And it's like, he was approaching this from a layman perspective. And this is the important point. Andrew Branca, big fan, as I mentioned. He's got a great legal analysis called Defense Delivers Disappointingly Weak Closing Argument. Well, I'll defer to the experts on this one, but I will point something out. Richards, this defense attorney you see here, there were some periods where I felt like he was insulting the jury. I mean it. Look, I think the facts speak for themselves. I think we sat here last night with Drew Hernandez, one of the defense's witnesses, a witness of the night in question. He filmed it. And we all agree Kyle Rittenhouse was acting in self-defense. These people were criminals. The state is lying. But you need to understand, you or I have the benefit of hindsight, internet searches. You need to frame this from the perspective of a juror who has no idea what's going on. They don't know or care about BLM riots. They don't know or care about what Antifa is. So Drew Hernandez did a great job in across the board, in my opinion, but there were some pitfalls. When he was saying Antifa and Black Lives Matter, people in the jury are probably like, I don't know what Antifa means. That's important. It's very important. But there were key moments where I was surprised at the demeanor that Richards had with the jury. Now, we'll see if it pays off. But I would never approach a jury that way. You guys watch my show. You hear how I talk about these things. Why? When I was a kid, I always had adults saying, wow, when you grow up, you're going to make a great lawyer. And I hate law and I hate politics and all that stuff, like actively involved in those positions. No. But the reason why people would say this to me is because I was always attempting to be convincing and diplomatic. And I think you'll see that in the videos I do, right? This video itself is an example of temper your expectations. We may see a conviction and there's good, and you can't ignore this. What do I say? What did I say last night? I am sad Rosenbaum lost his life. And I genuinely 100% mean it. Rosenbaum was a disgusting, abhorrent monster. Criminal does not do justice to the sociopathy, the atrocities this man committed. One of the worst human beings you could ever imagine. The things he did to children, I can't say. He was a disgusting, despicable person. And I don't want him harmed. There are people who just want vengeance, and I don't want to see that. I want to see him locked up. I want to see him remain in the mental hospital or the jail where they had put him away because he was a danger to himself and others. And they release him after committing these atrocities, and he goes to this event. He's not a member of any movement. He was just violent and angry, and he was screaming, "Shoot me." And you know what the problem is? What really shocked me? The defense said they were glad that Rittenhouse killed those men because if he had not, then he would have lost his life. That was a shocking statement for me to hear from the defense because, I got to be honest, it pissed me off. It pissed me off. Because I look at Anthony Huber, look, the guy who's been convicted of some crimes, but I'm not going to condemn a guy for crimes he's committed if he's paid his debt to society. And more importantly, if your argument is that these people committed crimes, then keep them locked up. Keep them locked up. Anthony Huber had no idea what was going on that night. Neither did Gage Grosskreutz. They were just a mob chasing after Rittenhouse, and they attacked him. And Kyle Rittenhouse had a right to defend himself. But I would never say it the way Richards would say it to somebody. And you know, because you've heard me say it. I would say something like, members of the jury, we mourn for those whose lives were lost in this tragic event. You have individuals, by many accounts, who were fighting for a cause they believed in. Now, I believe, whether or not they were fighting for a cause they believe in, they created a very serious harm to themselves and those around them. And because of their actions, they put other people's lives in jeopardy. It is unfortunate. It is traumatizing to Kyle Rittenhouse that he was forced into this position, that he desperately tried to escape repeatedly. He was put in a position where, as a 17-year-old, he would have to use such force on these people. And it's sad. No one should have lost their lives. But it wasn't Kyle who created the problem. It wasn't Kyle who threatened anyone's life. It wasn't Kyle who provoked anyone. No, in fact, it was Kyle who, as we heard from Drew Hernandez, tried to de-escalate. It was Kyle who brought a medical kit to try and treat those, even the protesters, the rioters themselves. But Rosenbaum took issue with Kyle Rittenhouse trying to put out fires and protect this community that he was seeking to destroy. You've heard it from the prosecution. They flipped over porta potties. They set fire to dumpsters. They torched a truck, flipping it in the middle of the street. They sought to cause harm and potentially put other people's lives at risk. So when Rosenbaum had threatened death upon Kyle Rittenhouse, he created the situation. And it was tragic and unfortunate. I think about the people who lost their lives and the pain that's going to be, for the people who knew Rosenbaum for all of the horrifying things he did. Now, I'll speak, not as if I'm talking to a jury, but to you guys, Rosenbaum was a disgusting, disgusting monster. And I think a demon, the things he did, I can't even say it on YouTube. They were so atrocious. They're so horrifying. But you have to keep in mind that there will be pain and suffering around the loss of life. The defense needed to acknowledge this, because you come off as callous, you come off as smug, and they're going to say, you think you're so high and mighty. I don't know what's going to happen today, man. This is not this segment I'm doing here. I feel kind of weird. It's not so much a normal like news segment like I would typically do. Like, here's the story, here's the analysis or anything. This is just like, we're headed for a really big moment, and you or I, all of us, our rights hang in the balance. Now, someone accurately pointed out the other day on Timcast IRL that this will only affect Wisconsin law. This is a Wisconsin statute. This is Wisconsin law. For sure. But you need to understand the cultural impacts around this. When it comes to law, it is irrelevant when a culture changes. Like I always mention, there are ridiculous laws where it's like you can't put a pie on the windowsill on Sunday afternoon in Boston. And it's because hundreds of years ago, the animals would be attracted by the smell during church hours or something. But that's not a problem these days. We have giant megatropolises. You can put a pie on your windowsill. No one's going to come after you. But it could still be illegal. I'm not saying that law is actually on the books, but there are laws like that. But our culture has shifted, and now we ignore it. No one cares if you have a pie on the windowsill. In fact, there are some states where homosexual relationships are literally illegal. That's a fact. Even though you can get married, but no cop is going to kick anyone's door open and go and look in the bedroom of these people because our culture changed. If in Wisconsin Kyle Rittenhouse loses this case, we are all hurt by it. It reminds me a bit of that quote from The Next Generation. I can't remember it specifically, but some of you may know it. It's when the first link in the chain is forged, we are all irrevocably damaged. And it's Picard talking about free speech and free association. They're persecuting a man they believe is a spy, something like that. And the point that he brought up is that first step towards taking away our rights will create a ripple effect in which we are all damaged by this. If Kyle Rittenhouse is convicted, we are all in trouble. It is a grain of sand to be added to the heap in which our self-defense rights, our bodily autonomy is stripped away from us, and that's why it's so important. Now, look. I don't want to be overly critical of the defense. I think they did well. I don't know if I have the legal expertise to say that they did well, but in my opinion, as someone just watching this, not as a lawyer, I thought they did well. There were a few moments where I was confused and like put off by the anger and the insulting notions. Andrew Branca writes very, very, very interestingly. He says the defense delivers a disappointingly weak closing argument. Poor choice of tone if goal is persuasion of jurors to defense narrative. And he goes on to mention, similarly to what I was saying, and I read this and I agreed with him, that the people in the jury want to know why people are dead. They want to know why people lost their lives. And there's a funny moment. There's a funny point in at one point in the trial. The prosecution facepalms. It was ADA Krause. They brought up Gage Grosskreutz. He testified that he pointed the weapon at Kyle Rittenhouse. And all of this evidence matters. And then Krause, facepalms. It was a viral moment. And a lot of people pointed out, never do that. No matter if you're the defense or the prosecution, no matter what they say, no matter how good or bad it is for your case, you always smile and carry on and look confident and poised. Because the jury will see you and go, whoa. That behavior says to me they're not confident in their case. Your body, the motions you make, your body language matters. Now, when it comes to Kyle Rittenhouse, there was a point where I saw him smirking and laughing. And he's done it several times. Now, some of it's okay. Some of it's okay when the judge makes a joke and everybody laughs. That's okay. That's good. It shows he's a kid, right? Or he's a young man. But there were some moments in the trial where the defense was where the prosecution had their witness testify, and you could see Kyle trying to hold back a smile, like he knew that the state's witnesses were bad. That is bad for the defense. I don't know exactly what's going to happen in that regard, but Branca points out that he says, taking the tone of those rioters, those looters, those arsonists are all scumbags, and this prosecution is just a suit wearing version of the same chaos. It may feel good. It may even be to some degree true, but does it help sell the narrative of innocence to a jury that is looking at this through entirely different eyes than those of the lead defense counsel? He says, drive a narrative of innocence consistent with, not contrary to, the jurors' sympathies. He says, if this jury convicts on any of these charges, and they well might, it will be because the prosecution has been successful in fostering some degree of sympathy among the jurors for the people killed, maimed, and purportedly endangered at the hands of Kyle Rittenhouse. To put it another way, unless that's happened, an acquittal is already secured, and the defense need not engage in the fire and brimstone display at all, but we can't know that, of course, so we must assume that some degree of sympathy for the victims has been successfully fostered by the prosecution. There's a way to do righteous indignation, in my opinion. I'm not a defense lawyer. I've just read legal analysis, and Binger had some emotional attacks that worked. However, I used to do nonprofit fundraising, and the goal was persuasion. To convince a person you just met to give you large sums of money. And what do you have in your arsenal? Nothing but your words. I was particularly good at it. I became a director. I was one of the nation's best fundraisers for several top nonprofits. Because I could meet a person and just explain and transfer that passion for these causes. And I like to bring that to politics and news and the way I do this to a certain degree. Not so much that I want anyone to think certain things. I think the truth is the most important thing. It's why I quit doing those jobs, because I realized they were too deceitful. And for me, when I believe in a principle, freedom, or whatever, I want to convey that passion and understanding and drive people to understand why it's so important we have freedom and individual liberties, why it's so important that Kyle Rittenhouse be acquitted on all charges. I didn't feel that from the defense. I didn't feel that attempt at persuasion. I felt someone who was angry at the prosecutor, who was angry at the cheating and the lying from the state, and so he was angry about it. But he wasn't angry in the way that the jurors would understand. The first lesson when we would do fundraising is You are always the person you are talking to. It's interesting, right? In this argument, in this article from Branca, he says that he should have been approaching it from the juror's perspective, and you always do that in sales. If there's a dude walking down the street and he looks like Ian from the show, long hair, freaky people, crazy hippie shirt, and I walked up to him, strong-shouldered, and said, "Good day, sir. Give me but a moment of your time. I want to talk to you about how we're going to fight for freedom of speech. Now, you look like a busy man." He'd be like, "Dude, chill, bro. You're so wound up." Not relatable. If I walk up to a suit-wearing man, carrying a briefcase, checking his watch, and I go, "Yo, what up?" Man, come on, chill out, man. You don't gotta be in a hurry. Hear me out. He's gonna be like, "Yo, don't waste my time. I've got an important meeting. I don't know what this hippie stuff is." So the point is, it's called mirroring. I think of it more like respect, camaraderie, rapport. I'm not going to try and play some silly game with a dude wearing a suit. I see he's a no-nonsense guy. I'm going to be like, "Hey, man, listen, you got 5 seconds. We're here to fundraise for a nonprofit that fights for the right of free speech so that individuals can speak their minds without fear of government oppression. If that's something you care about, we need your support right now because we got a ton of cases. Now, if you want, I can go through them for you, or I can tell you right." You've got to respect the individual you're talking to. I'm not going to walk up to a long hair hippie guy and treat him like a suit, because that is not respectful to him, to his views, to the way he behaves, the way he carries himself. If someone comes off relaxed and chill, I want to maintain that space for them. When it comes to the jury, I feel the defense should have approached this from the perspective of someone who has no idea what's going on, and that is your community, as residents of Kenosha, was under attack. And I understand that these people believe in something, that many of them are angry, many of them are scared, many of them are furious. But that doesn't justify the destruction of our stores, the fear in the men who own these car sources, these gas stations. They were genuinely worried that their lives would be completely destroyed. For several days, a curfew was put in place on all of us, on all of you as jurors, and I would say us, because of the violence of many of these rioters. And that being said, no one deserves to lose their life over what is happening in this country and what has happened with these protests. No one deserves to lose their life, not even Jacob Blake. But you have to, I don't know if they could bring up Jacob Blake, but you have to understand that it was not Kyle Rittenhouse who created the circumstances by which people lost their lives. He came after the riots had started. He came there to help those who were actually engaged in rioting because he's a good person. We heard from Drew Hernandez. He even tried to temper people's emotions and de-escalate that violence. But some people were just angry, and they had no regard for human life. And so they put Kyle Rittenhouse in a position where he ran for his life. He fired 4 times at Joseph Rosenbaum within 0.739 of a second. Well, of course, there's no way he could know if any one of those bullets made contact or stopped him. And of course, there was no way he could know that Richie McGinnis was running up in his direction. And of course, it was Richie McGinnis, as a journalist, who knew he was running towards danger. But Richie McGinnis didn't flee after the fact. Rosenbaum created the danger. Kyle Rittenhouse has a right to protect himself. Now, this is me ragging on the defense. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just kind of venting some frustrations and some fears. To be honest, this segment is all about fears. I genuinely fear for Kyle Rittenhouse. I fear for all of us if he is convicted. Now, if he gets convicted on a lesser charge, it is what it is. They can say, look, the ADA made a good point that he brought a rifle to a riot. And in that regard, we think he was ultimately in his actions later on acting recklessly. They could find that. They could find that. I don't agree with it. I believe you have a right to keep and bear arms. I believe Gage Grosskreutz has a right to keep and bear arms concealed in his waistband, regardless of his permit. However, right now the statute says you can't do that. It's illegal, and he was wrong to have it. Kyle Rittenhouse was legally in possession of that weapon. I believe if you have a right to keep and bear arms, it cannot be held against you. And I think they should have made that point. Kyle Rittenhouse carried a rifle because it was the only thing he was legally allowed to carry. He couldn't have a handgun or a shotgun or a short-barreled rifle or an AR pistol. This is the weapon they allow him to have as a 17-year-old. And the judge told you that count was dismissed. It's no longer a factor because he was allowed to have it. And they try to use that against him. And they'll use it against us. All right, I'm not going to rant too much on this one. Today's going to be a crazy day. You know, look, normally I do a morning segment and I'll be like, hey, Joe Biden, inflation, whatever. This was basically a lot of opinion, a lot of perspective on what's going to happen today. And I got to be honest, segments like this make no sense in the long run because in an hour, this video is probably not going to be relevant. The verdict could come back in 10 minutes. They could walk right out and say self-defense. And I'm like, well, there's a pointless video. But I want to talk about this because I'm passionate about it. I hope you're all paying attention to where we're going as a country. I'll leave it there. Next segment will be at 1 p.m. on this channel. We might have a verdict at any point today. Deliberations can be swift. But we'll see. Thanks for hanging out, everybody, and I'll see you all at 1 p.m.